there, I'm Tatiana Volk, the GM Witch, and today we're going to be talking about the dumpster fire that is Darkest Dungeon, the board game, and the scammy response that we're getting from the creators, Mythic Games. Buckle up and let's start this journey with a little bit of a story time. Imagine this. It is November 2020, and a huge company puts on a wildly successful Kickstarter to back their newest board game, Darkest Dungeon. They set out to get $300,000 to fund this project and instead received $5.6 million with over 28,000 backers. For those like me who picked the Ancestral Pledge and cashed out a whopping $330 for the all-in package, we were expecting to receive our goodies by the following year, November 2021. Unfortunately, on July 20th, 2022, we get an email from Mythic Games regarding an important update about our products. Obviously, COVID happened at the beginning of 2020, but several months before this Kickstarter even started, but it did have some lingering effects on some Kickstarters, and unfortunately, this one was included, which we got to hear all about a few months shy of a year after we were supposed to have received our orders. Dear backers, this is a very important announcement, and we thank you for taking the time to read it thoroughly and to the end. Firstly, let us apologize for the late delivery of Darkest Dungeon, the board game. It goes on to talk about the unsustainable increase in costs, delivery, shipping, manufacturing, and the need for our help, an additional contribution depending on the content of your original order to bring the board game to life. Mind you, this is nearly a year after we were supposed to get things to begin with. So what's going on? As it turned out, Mythic Games decided to break up the campaign into two waves. The first wave included the first two English items broken up into 3 boxes, and the second wave would include the additional language along with the remaining items from the Kickstarter. There's more to this, but we'll get to that a little bit later after we talk about my specific experience. This update goes on to talk about the current conditions, soaring shipping costs, and subsidies, and lists out some of the effects that COVID has had on a lot of different projects. They go on to let us know that shipping costs at that time was $3.1 million, which was $1.4 million more than what the backers had already paid. And so they decided to reopen our GameFound accounts to request those of us with the English versions to pay an extra contribution in addition to our shipping costs. And here is the kicker, the most important part of this little story, so keep this little nugget for yourself because we're going to come back to this in a little bit, is they were asking for contributions in shipping for both Wave 1 and Wave 2 at this time. They specify to avoid soliciting those backers that have English products ordered in Wave 2 a second time and requesting a second contribution for another small amount, we will be asking those backers to make their contributions for Wave 2 at the same time as their Wave 1 content. In other words, if you decide that you want to pay for your Wave 1 contribution by August 1st of 2022, you won't have to pay again, right? You're paying for both waves in one go. I had already paid $46 for the shipping of my $330 all-in pledge. So them requesting another $65 was a bit steep, but considering it was going to be the only contribution I would need to do to get all of the boxes that I had already purchased, I decided to do it anyway. And true to their word, several months later, at the beginning of 2023, I did in fact receive the Crimson Court expansion along with the 2 boxes of the core game set. So that's where the story ends, right? I'm afraid not. I bring you to October 5th, 2023, when we get another wonderful email from the creators of Darkest Dungeon Mythic Games stating Wave 2 contribution full details. Pretty much filled with a lot of the same information. Things are tough. COVID was difficult. The war is making things more expensive, and they don't have enough money to give us what we've already paid for. And so they're going to need not another small amount, but a larger contribution than the first one requested for Wave 1. But of course, those of us who have already paid in Wave 1, we get to save $20 on Wave 2, where we were supposed to pay 0. So how much does that mean we end up paying? Good question. For the all-in pledge, they charged me $52 for contributions plus an additional $26 in shipping. That means I have paid $189 over my $330 all-in pledge. And it's not optional. As they state further down in the email, if you do not wish to or cannot pay, you will not receive your game at the time of delivery. We remain open to the possibility of delivering to you depending on price developments in the future, although it is highly unlikely that prices will drop significantly in the coming months. Also, since this is the last printing we will do for this game, any later requests for it made after the contribution period will be subject to availability at the time and must include payments of the contribution required to print the game or desired expansion. So, if you're not okay with paying $189 to get the products you've already paid for, you will lose out on $330. Now, they do mention that you are able to request refunds, and there have been a small number of people who have actually been able to get those refunds. But if you go down to the comment sections, there's also a large number of people who have requested and have gotten no response and are still getting email requests for contributions despite them being in the process of requesting a refund. Some of these people have been waiting years for their refunds. Isn't that fun? Now, the icing on the cake, this is something that doesn't affect me but is equally upsetting. Mythic Games allowed backers to choose from a couple of different language options for their board games. But unfortunately, those people who paid for the game in their specific language have just been informed that Mythic Games is only going to be printing the Darkest Dungeon sets in English. And to make up for this huge mistake and really awful handling, they're going to be making language packs. But they need at least 1,000 people for each language to pay up, or else they won't make those at all. And those people who purchase physical games will get PDF downloads instead. A round of applause for Mythic Games. And so, if you are wondering what the uproar is and why everybody is pretty freaking upset, that is why. Admittedly, I'm not a big fan of paying $189 in shipping, when originally they estimated it being closer to $25 or $35, and I already paid $46 instead. Now, they have been clear in saying that this $189 in additional charges isn't all shipping, but it's also not optional. Now, for a little bit of context, if you don't back a lot of Kickstarters, I have backed a couple hundred at this point, and several of them have been hit by the horrible effects of the pandemic and some other unfortunate situations that have happened. In some cases, they have put out an optional request for additional contributions, which usually range about $20, and which I have gladly given in those scenarios because there was a lot of transparency and no requirement for those who cannot afford it. Seeing that Mythic Games is willing to deny products that have already been purchased from people who are unable to afford the additional demands that they are making for a product that was supposed to be received several years ago for significantly less money is not okay practices. Another complaint that a lot of us have had is that during this entire process, Mythic Games has continued to promote the selling of these products via their email newsletter to people outside of the Kickstarter campaign. There are also a huge number of backers who still have not anything from the product, whereas the core set and first expansion are available for people to purchase in stores and in other situations. Mythic Games is an established company. These practices are questionable, and despite the high quality of the products, I do wonder if it's worth it to work with a company that has messed up this bad. Unfortunately, I have succumbed once again to paying the additional $78 on top of my last $65, on top of my original $46, and I am still hoping that early 2024 in April or May, as they have suggested, that we will be receiving the rest of our Kickstarter. It is true that Kickstarter is not a pre-order platform, and not all Kickstarters succeed. But when a company is constantly pushing the sales of a product that they themselves know may not succeed, and is forcing the contributors to pay large amounts of money in addition to their original payments in hopes to receive something, there is something off. For a company who has done multiple Kickstarters in the past and has a pretty large platform, I would just expect more. The only reason why I spent so much to begin with is because they were considered a reputable source. This wasn't as much of a gamble as you would expect from smaller creators who have never done a Kickstarter in the past. So the Darkest Dungeon board game Kickstarter is in fact a dumpster fire, and the Mythic Game Company has done some pretty questionable things in response to their mistakes. At this point, a lot of people are afraid that come April 2024, we are going to be receiving yet another request for contributions to get what we have already paid for multiple times already. I myself will never back another Mythic Game Kickstarter, and will probably be hesitant to get any of their other products moving forward, even if available from a more reputable source and already in completion. I would love to hear your thoughts on this situation down below, and if you made it this far, include a dice emoji. Until next time, bye!